Hello, Sam. Welcome to Office Hours with Dr. Pease.
Thanks for
You were
having
in
me.
my class in when? What year?
2018, possibly 19.
Wow. Which
Yeah.
class?
I took human behavior and social work with women.
Let's talk about where you are now.
I graduated in 2019 with my bachelor's, my social work degree, with the plan to get my master's, my MSW. Had applied and gotten in Boston College and at U of I. And then moved to Corpus Christi with my boyfriend at the time, who's now my husband, and just started working instead. I got hired right away by the in Texas, it's the Department of Family and Protective Services. But it's CPS. So yeah, graduated in May, moved in June, started working in July. And I started on the back end of things. So after kids were already removed from home, already in care, and were either in foster or relative placement. And then working with families, both like parents, home of removal families, and then placement families and the kids to either reunify or work towards other, permanency kind of goals. I did that for a while. And then we lived in Jacksonville and I did whatever stuff because we weren't there for very long. And then we moved to Washington and I did CPS again, started on the back end again, doing like the same kind of thing, and was like, no, like I can't do investigations. Like that scares the shit out of me. Like I can't do it. No way.
You loved it.
Within like 3 months, I transferred to investigations, loved it. And of course, like, and I know you have experience in this area as well. Like, so hard sometimes, so hard. But yeah, loved it. Loved doing investigations. Had such a good time. Now we're back in Texas, actually, and I am just, I don't want to say just being a mom because, like, but I don't have a taxable income at this point.
So,
Yeah.
the one thing I said, I was a homemaker for a while for
Mm-hmm.
DCFS in Illinois when I had my bachelor's, or maybe I was working on my bachelor's. But anyway, I said the one job I would never do was child protection. And I
Mm-hmm.
ended up back there when I was 50, and just, it was the love of my
Yeah,
life. For 11 years, I worked there, and it was just like, what? Why did I run from this?
I know.
I'm curious as to why. I know why it was such a click for me. Why do you know why it clicked for you?
Um, I I really enjoyed and did really well at doing forensic interviews with kids. Um, and like got certified with like the what is it, like National Association of Child Forensic Interviewers or whatever. So I have that certificate, but I loved doing that. And even just talking with kids in general. And I was doing that on the back end too, of course, but and it was also always just like different kind of stuff every day, you know? And it's like there would be days when we'd like be like going through like people's like Facebooks and like trying to find families and like walking around properties like in our boots and like taking pictures of license plates and calling detectives like who's this car registered to and like doing all that. Like we had a blast doing all of
Yes.
like the digging deep kind of stuff. That was the best.
It really is what that's what attracted me to it, was that thinking on your feet, really
Mm-hmm.
trying to find out the real story. But I have a funny story, because as child protection investigators, you're trying to take in everything as you go into a
Yeah.
home, and you interview the kids first, and you're trying to take in everything. And I had this one investigation that I went out with a dear friend of mine, a sheriff, and his name's Mike Miller, and we went
Mm-hmm.
out on this case, and we were sitting in this house, and the mother's story was so compelling. We were both sitting at her kitchen table and she was talking. And I mean, I was
Yeah.
just in her world, listening to her, feeling very proud of my skills.
Yeah.
Miller and I get out in the car and he goes, who was the guy that came through the bedroom and walked out? And I said, there was a guy
What
in.
guy? Yeah. Yeah.
He said, great investigative skills, Kingery. You're going to go a
Yeah.
long way in this field. I
Yeah.
just, it's such an interesting thing because you know that you're looking, but at the same time, I found myself so connected to
Hmm.
the people. And, everybody's like, oh, but they were perpetrators. But where did, so I always say I never knew anybody that, and maybe I just was fortunate in my 11 years, but I didn't meet people that just were set out to be cruel and want to hurt their kids. They had all kinds of shit going on that led to the situation.
Yeah, I'm mostly inclined to agree with you. I have said before, I really believe that like 97% of parents are really just like doing the best they can with what they know how to do, with the way that they were raised, what's just what they know. And that there's really only like a scant like 3% that are
Mhm.
really just like bad doing like evil shit, you know?
Even
Unfortunately I
that, I
did
think,
work with a couple
even
of those, but
even that, I think, is a mental illness,
oh,
right?
for sure. Yeah.
Yeah,
Sure.
but I agree with you that when you have a case like that, is it hard to find your social worker self when you're dealing with someone that's just like, God, this person is mean?
I feel like in the moment, I feel like I really was like a great professional. I feel like I was very respectful. I was open. I listened. I was very proud in those moments that I was sitting there thinking, like, you are terrible. But, like, outwardly, it was like I was being very professional, I thought. And then, of course, like, I would go back to the office, go back home, and be like, this guy and that, whatever, and would really just, like, let it all kind of out. But in those moments, I feel like I don't know. I feel like I was able to be professional, to sometimes find some fragment of like empathy for people, but really being trying to really champion the kids in the case. I mean, and that's not to say that you can't do both of those at the same time, but yeah.
Sometimes it's harder. I've had some sexual abuse cases that
Hmm.
really haunted me later because
Yeah.
you can't take that back.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
growing up, most of my cases, I don't know about, but I think our statistics were like something around 80% were neglect.
Yeah.
I mean, a very few cases were actual abuse. But when you
Hmm.
would get one of those, the severe physical abuse or sexual abuse, those rip you up.
Yeah. Yeah, especially now as a parent too, I don't know that I could return to doing investigations.
Really.
Uh, yeah, I feel like, and I've said this before to my husband and stuff, I think my next job will be just doing forensic interviews at like a child advocacy center. But to actually be like going out to homes, I don't know if I could return to that. We had a case, and these really stick with you, like that severe physical abuse you were talking about. My broken baby, he was 3 months old at the time that I got it, and had 15 some broken bones, and different stages of healing and stuff, and when I met him the first time, he had, two big casts on his legs. Real cute little guy. And younger parents. But I remember going to their home after the police had talked with the parents and stuff. Going to the home, dad had already said, yeah, it was me. Like, this is what I did, whatever. I guess the baby had been like sleeping on him on his chest, and maybe he wasn't sleeping. He had been on his chest and just crying, upset, and I mean, especially this young, you're trying to figure stuff out, and of course, like babies cry, right? Couldn't get him to stop crying, and ended up like grabbing his ankles and like flinging him like against the back of the couch. I remember like feeling this couch, and he said that the cushion on the back had been down at the time, and you could feel like the wooden frame of the couch, because it's just fabric covering it. And I remember thinking like, it is a miracle that this baby didn't like smash his skull into this, you know. Um, but it's like you can hear my baby crying now, and like I know like he's fine, he's not being hurt, he's safe, whatever. But of course, like hearing your baby cry is like, oh God, like that sucks. So just to imagine the kind of crying and sounds that this baby would have made when his bones were being broken, I don't know that I would really be able to be professional, I guess, in that kind of
Mhm.
case.
I can
Uh,
understand that.
especially now, having my own kid. Because we've had the long crying up every hour and a half kind of nights too. It's really really hard.
It
Um,
is.
but I yeah. So I don't know that I'd be able to return to that.
So innocent that I
Yeah.
always wondered. I had a similar case, except the baby was 18 months old and
Mm-hmm.
had like about that many broken bones in various stage of healing. And we were
Mm-hmm.
never, this is a case that haunts me because we were never able to figure out who did it. No one
Yeah.
ever admitted to it. And so these are the kind of cases that will keep you up at night
Yeah.
because we couldn't find out who it was, we took protective custody.
Right.
And the kids and that baby and its sibling ended up being adopted because no one
Mm-hmm.
ever admitted. And I've always thought,
Yeah.
what if they didn't do it?
Sure.
But the mindset of the department was, if not them, who else? I mean, they
Sure.
even admitted the child was around no one else. So it
Yeah.
had to be them. It had to be one of them. And
Mm-hmm.
neither one of them would admit. So those kids, and one of the kids hadn't been harmed. So that
Yeah.
kid, who was about 5 or 6 maybe, went into
Mm-hmm.
care because of what happened to their younger sibling.
Right.
Just this is the kind of thing about child welfare, that the cases, many of them are things where you can do something to help, and like someone is
Yeah.
depressed and their house is dirty and you offer
Mm-hmm.
services, and those kind are just like, yeah, that's okay. But when you
Yeah.
get these really tough ones where a child has seriously been hurt, boy, it's hard to keep your wits about you as a social worker.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure.
Did you find that the things that, because this podcast is about social work and the field of social work, but also about social work education, did you
Mm-hmm.
find that what you learned in class was helpful when you went out in the field? Especially, I'm
Yeah.
thinking about situations like that.
I feel like it was mostly in not necessarily like the like curriculum, like I wasn't thinking back on any like syllabi, but just in the sense of like how to like sit there and just talk and like connect with people, and to just be where they're at, you know, that especially like in the child welfare area, you're coming into somebody's home already at like this authority kind of place. People are afraid. Their immediate thought is this person's going to take my kid.
Yes,
And you need to, if you plan to have any kind of working relationship with these people, you need to go in and be normal. You need to humanize yourself.
true.
And I feel like I had both with you and several other professors to just be able to just like to almost like teach you how to just like sit and like be normal with people, um and because a lot of times I was a lot younger than like the parents and stuff that I was talking to.
Yes,
When I started working I was 21, so going into homes, like trying to talk and like educate like parents who are, in their 40s, 50s, whatever, I'm sure could be sitting there thinking like, who's this kid? coming into my home telling me like what I can do to my kid, you know? I think that I was able to, if you can find it in yourself to be normal, to kind of like bring yourself down a little bit, you can't really have much of an ego in this one, you know?
So true.
Um, and so I feel like that was helpful, and I feel like I got a lot of that from school, from class.
And I think child protection, especially, but child welfare in general, is that you have to throw your judgment out the window. Like you said,
Yeah.
with that person that had really severely abused a kid, you have to be able to talk to that person
Yeah.
without letting yourself go to those places of who the hell are you? I mean,
Yeah.
who would do something like this? You have to keep that at bay. I know I went out on a case one time, and it was a large family, and there was a grandma. It was kind of the grandma was kind of the head of the household anyway. You're building rapport, you do whatever you can do. She had a tongue ring,
Cool.
and I had a cop with me, and she
Yeah.
was like my age, a grandma, and I was like, oh my God, I got to know about your tongue ring. I mean, that's
Mhm.
basic, almost how I started the interview. And she was
Yeah.
like, oh, my tongue ring. We got on this whole conversation about tongue rings, and
Yeah.
then eventually we got into this stuff. And when I got back out in the car with my cop friend, he said, not getting a fucking tongue ring. What were you telling her that for? I said,
Yeah.
I might. You never know.
I
I
could.
might.
Yeah.
I
Right.
could. But it was just finding that connection. And I'm not sure you can teach that, Sam.
Yeah.
I think that's a skill. Either you have that innate ability to just like people, even no
Mhm.
matter what they look like or talk like or act like, you're just interested in them. I don't know. Jury's out for me
Yeah.
on whether or not you can teach it.
Yeah, I agree. I think you can. I think if it's there for you, I think you can certainly learn to cultivate it a little better. Um, but yeah, there were definitely some people that, as I became a more seasoned worker, and then had newer workers like shadow me, and you would get to the point where it's like, okay, like you take the lead, like I'm gonna kind of like step back, and they'd kind of like step up, and he'd be like, oh God, like
Let
dude,
me back in.
yeah,
Put me
wait,
in, coach.
wait, like I was lucky to have some pretty good teams that I worked with, both in supervisors and in colleagues, that I think made a really big difference. I don't think I would have been able to do my job nearly as well without my teams.
Area that you were in, were there a lot? Because I always worked in a rural area where
Mhm.
resources were sparse. In the
Yeah,
areas you were able to work in, did you have the ability to offer things to people that they actually needed? Because
sometimes.
for me, it was always like everything's, oh, counseling. They need counseling. Everybody needs.
Yeah, who doesn't? Yeah,
And
right.
then there was a waiting list for six
Of
months to
course.
get into counseling. Oh, for God's sake, what are we doing here?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, no, similar kind of issues. So I was in Corpus Christi in Texas. And that's where we are now too. But so I mean, some stuff a little more, I don't want to say urban because that's not true, but some more kind of services that are available. And then in Washington, I was in on Whidbey Island, which is 2 hours northwest of Seattle, and things are pretty, not, I wouldn't say rural, but things are sparse as far as services go.
Hmm.
Definitely lots of waiting lists. Whereas, okay, we got to get your kid on the list for what was the name of this program? It's gonna drive me nuts, and I'm not gonna be able to remember it. But it was like intensive outpatient for kids, and they would come to your home and work with your kid and their behavioral kind of issues and stuff like that. Huge waiting list for that. Of course, like lots of families need it. They're waiting forever. Yeah, we're already on the list. And mental health counseling, here and there. We did have a couple substance abuse resources, though, right there on the island, which was nice. A lot of times, unfortunately, people wouldn't necessarily follow through with that, but it was accessible to people, it was available.
Any
But
discussion of fixing the environment, or was the places where you work, like the place where I work, it's always about fixing the parents and what they're doing wrong? Did you have anything that like targeted poverty? How can we heal the poverty or the lack of education, or looking at the environment? Because
Hmm.
social workers, we say we use the person and environment lens. Do we really? I don't
Yeah.
know. It seems like to me we've really put the onus on the client. Now, if you
Yeah.
get this kind of therapy and this kind of treatment, then you can do better. But
Yeah.
sometimes you can't if your life is shit.
Yeah, for sure. It was a lot of band-aids over bullet hole kind of things. So, as I mean, I remember we used to several times we rented like big huge dumpsters for families when it was like the house is a mess, this is a hoarder house, this is whatever. All right, well, here's a dumpster, we're going to pay for it. It's going to sit in your driveway for, a week, whatever, fill it up.
Yep.
They'll take it away for you.
Yep.
Um So in the moment, is that kind of fixing like that part of the issue? Yeah. Um, but what's to say that like in 3 months that we're not going to be back at square one? We had a parenting coach and stuff that we worked with could refer to who would come and work in the home. Um, so to help parents build up skills and stuff like that. But I mean, I think at least on the front end, it was very much like, what can we do to fix this now? Um, and because we got to move on, we got to move on. We were supposed to have cases closed within 60 days. What can you really truly fix in 60 days?
That's
Um,
when you refer them on. Was your next level intact family services where people
sometimes,
could
yeah.
be longer? Yeah.
Yeah, it was either close, refer for services, or they would go to the back end and, kids would be in care.
Yes. And you were, or we anyway, in Illinois, were rewarded for a 30-day investigation. That
Okay.
was like gold star. If you could get
Yeah.
it in and out in 30 days.
Our like lower level investigation, it was called family assessment response. That was ideally 45 days. Yeah, that was closed. But you had in investigations and you had up to 60 for that. I had many a case that went over that. But um it was supposed to be, yeah, within 45 or 60.
I guess when I think about child welfare, are we had this discussion a million times at the office. Are we law enforcement or are we social
Hmm.
services? Because especially
Yeah.
child protection, you're going in and your child safety is number one,
Hmm.
but it isn't the only thing we're looking at. Did you
Hmm.
feel you had that same kind of vibe I do when I talk about investigations, the digging around and being a detective kind of thing? Did you feel kind of coppish?
I want to say yes, but I also like hate to say that. And just because of a kind of a bias towards our law enforcement. We worked with some really great cops, some really great detectives. We also worked with some clowns sometimes. Um,
Yes.
so there would be times where anytime you had a physical or sexual abuse case, you had to refer to law enforcement and then call them up, say, hey, I got to see this kid. Do you want to come? Do you want me to just go? What are we doing? And sometimes they would go with you, which was always like the worst because they just could not interview well. So it's like you're sitting there like watching, like it's like watching a train wreck, that it's, but you gotta let them like do their thing and then like we'll come in and like do our thing. But so there were times, yes, where I definitely felt like a detective. And those were like the best times when, like I said, we'd be going through people's Facebooks, scrolling through and looking for their friends and pulling up the Google Maps satellite. Okay, there's all these cars here in the picture and like whatever. We had some really great actual detectives that we worked with. One was Scott Johnson. We called him, I probably shouldn't say this, but it'll be funny if he hears it. But we used to call him Baby Scott at the office because, and I'm sure he was, older than I was, but he just looked like he was like 16. His face was just like so young. And one of my coworkers told me once, she just gotten off the phone with him. She's like, "Yeah, I almost called him Baby Scott, like to his face." um, but like he was great to work with, and we could call anytime and be like, "Hey, you know, can you come meet me here? We got to go back to this place. Can you run these license plates for me? You know, what's going on with this person? Have you guys had much interaction with them?" And those were the best kind of police that we worked with for sure.
Those relationships are priceless with
Yeah.
school system, law enforcement, medical professionals, and that's part of your job too, of course, is to
Yep.
know where the resources are. Were you able to say, like, for I worked in a 7 county office, but we each
Hmm.
had our special county where we could
Hmm.
build those relationships. It was just wonderful. Did you work
Yeah.
in a situation where you were with the same people often, or were you always seeing different people?
No, we were in the same people. So Whidbey Island is one county, and we covered the whole island, so the whole county. So I knew, I think, all of the principals at all the schools, most of the counselors, most if not all of the counselors at all the schools, the detectives at it was there were two offices. I knew all of those guys, all of the service providers that would provide services for our families. I knew all of them. The doctors' offices, I could call. Hey, it's Sam at CPS. Hey, Sam, it's Doctor whoever. Just returning your call. You know, um, the records people. Yeah, and I think that I was able to get a really good working relationship with all those people too. But the same thing, like I could call whatever principal and say, "Hey, you know, is so and so here today?" Because sometimes the first time you're talking to somebody, it's, well, you need to fax, like email me a photo of your badge and whatever and all that kind of stuff.
Yes.
Um, and yeah, and after a while, it's like, you know, I did not. I could call any school and be, hey, you know, can you send me this kid's records or this whatever, and it was done. So I think that that's really critical too. I would
Yes.
encourage anybody going into child welfare to really cultivate relationships with school providers, with daycare, with medical, with whoever's local. Like, you got to become pals with those guys.
Absolutely. And even if they don't share your viewpoint of child
Yeah.
welfare, I just did an interview with a retired cop friend of mine
Hmm.
who went out on a lot of investigations with me. And we used to argue because he would use the term bad guys and good guys.
Sure.
And we would have these philosophical discussions about, and we did it again during our podcast interview,
Yeah.
about bad guys and good guys. And I'd always say there are no bad guys.
Yeah.
We're trying to look out, but I think those
Yeah.
kind of conversations that you only have when you're building relationships helped
Hmm.
me grow.
Hmm.
And I know from talking to him that it helped him look at things a little differently.
Yeah.
And the more that we can get these systems that sometimes can just be so siloed and
Hmm.
so linear focused on Jesus, some of the dumb shit that they get focused on, like what
Yeah.
your income is and whether or not you
Yeah.
deserve SNAP benefits, if they can just begin to see the humanity in the families. And I always wanted to say that we serve,
Hmm.
they, the big hot shots always say, we serve at the president's pleasure. Well, I
Ew.
served at the
Yeah.
people's pleasure. It
Yeah.
was for the people that I did that job. I
Hmm.
don't know if that's pervasive in our field. I don't want to judge anybody. Maybe that's kind of boastful for me to say that I knew that my motives were to
Yeah.
help those people. I wasn't sure about everybody.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you. I was in it because I still believe deserve to have a tough, strong person in their corner, that's going to fight for them. And why not me? You know, so that's why I was in it for sure.
Part of fighting for them to me is making sure that their parents have everything they need, because
Yeah,
the
to be
person, the
successful.
person who is best for these kids is their parents.
Yeah.
So the more we can do, and we both know in some
Yep.
cases it just can't happen. And
Yeah.
then so then you look for alternatives. But from
Yeah.
the get-go, it should be, what can I do to help
Absolutely.
this person?
Yeah, I don't want to bring kids into the office. I don't want to take kids out of homes. There's some
No.
notion, I've seen it all over social media, that like we get some kind of like bonus or something if we like take kids from homes. I never
I
saw any of those checks.
I didn't
But
either, but I had a 14-year-old kid I took custody of, and he was convinced that I was going to get a bonus for taking him. And I kept saying, I promise you, I am
yeah,
not. But I don't
no.
think he ever believed me.
Yeah, that just doesn't happen. Certainly, I haven't worked in every state, but in the ones that I've worked in, there were no bonus checks given for kids removed. We didn't want to do it. You know? I mean, obviously because it's of course traumatic to this child, to this family, number first and foremost.
Yes.
But on the administrative side, now I have to either go to court, get some kind of court order signed, or I'm calling law enforcement to do emergency protective custody. I have to wait for the police to show up, or I'm waiting for the judge to sign whatever. I'm frantically calling relative search unit to say, hey, I got this kid coming in, start looking up who can take this kid. Because, of course, we want to place with family or kin.
Yes.
Um, then I'm frantically making calls to those people to say, like, hey, can you pick up this kid? Otherwise, we're going back to the office for a couple hours. Now I'm waiting for the after hours team to show up because I have to go home because I have to be here right at 8 o'clock tomorrow to like keep rolling. We got to like, I don't want to do it. I don't
No.
want to do it.
No. And the
So
state doesn't want you to do it because it costs them
no,
money. I hate to
yeah,
say that, but it costs money
it
to put
does.
kids in foster care. So nobody's down with that. They don't want that.
No,
Family
no,
preservation. Is it still called family preservation? I wonder.
I think so.
I haven't been in the field for so long, but yeah,
Mhm.
I preserving the family. I've said this like 10,000 times when teaching, is that they, some places it's called DCS, Department of Children's Services, but
Mhm.
in Illinois it's
DCF.
DCF. There's a big old family in there.
Yep.
And I always prided myself on thinking of it as a family intervention, which
Mhm.
sometimes led to removal of a child, and that sucked
Yeah.
awful,
I
but
know.
it's part
Yeah.
of it.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. I think in the states that I worked with, it was the same. In Illinois, I was just an intern in Illinois. Texas, it's Family and Protective Services. In Washington, I should definitely know what it is. It definitely has family in it, but
It does.
I don't remember what it is. But um, yeah, I think that that's really critical too. And certainly work. I think I had more of a my goal is, of course, not to remove children from homes, but kids were already in homes when I was going out, when I was working in Washington, right? When I was doing investigations. Versus when I was in Texas working on the back end, kids were out of home already. So the focus 99% of the time, was to reunify, to what do we need to do to get families back together here?
Yes.
Um, so I think it was easier to to really keep that at the forefront when I was working on the back end because this is something that's been separated. We need to get back together here.
Absolutely. I
Versus,
recently finished writing a book with a colleague, and it's moral injury within the child welfare system. And we use case studies to show how the system of child welfare often does more harm than good. In your experiences, we know like you said, it's trauma when we take kids from their home. The whole DCFS intervention or the whole child welfare intervention as a whole, you work different places. Did you feel like we hurt more than we helped, or
I I am in, I I hope that the answer is no. Um, but I know like in Texas, for example, and this was a couple of years ago too, so things might have changed by now. I'm not sure, but Like marijuana, for example, was illegal in Texas. So kids, I think kids were getting removed for if
Yeah.
their parents were smoking pot, um, which I mean, in Washington, that's really not something that we cared about, because it was legal there. But as long as kids didn't have access to marijuana and stuff, like I don't care. That's not an issue
Right.
for us. So the amount of like lock boxes that we gave out to people, astronomical. Anytime like we got an intake saying like whatever concerns of drugs and stuff, we were automatically like bringing a lockbox with us to hope that like, okay, here's a safe place to store your pot. Like, great, we're done. You know.
Yes. Yes.
Um, so I think that the laws that we kind of had to go by could certainly affect us in that way, if that like makes sense.
Yes. Yes.
Um, because I like you could tell that it's like, okay, these kids aren't being hurt, but their parents are using drugs that are illegal. So by policy, we what my
They
hands are
can
kind of
drink beer
tied.
out of the fridge. They can drink beer out of the fridge, just
Right.
not for whatever reason.
Yeah, that's a whole other thing. But
One of the things I'm curious about, Sam, is one of our chapters in the book was about uh, people that are injured by the child welfare system are, of course, the children and the
sure.
parents,
Hmm.
but people like you and me. Did you
Hmm.
feel like working in that field for your years that you did
Hmm.
took a toll on you as far as feeling like, have I done the right thing? Is this a good thing? Am I really a social worker, or was I
Hmm.
more of a cop? Have you had
Hmm.
any of those lasting repercussions?
I like to believe I have sort of like healed from it now that I've had a break from it, because I did have a moment that I knew like I got to get into something else. I had a case where the intake was that dad has been messaging an underage girl. I think she was like 15 at the time, who lived in another state, trying to get her across state lines to Washington for sex. And dad had I think she was like 2 years old at the time, daughter, um, who the messages say that he sent were talking about how he can like make her into some kind of like sex slave or something. He had sent some nudes where the baby is like right there with him, but just talking about essentially like sexually grooming and sexually abusing his daughter. And as far as we know, that didn't actually happen. This is also a family that I had worked with previously in totally unrelated concerns. Like I had been in this house before, I'd talked to this dad before. I remember getting this intake that I was going to be going back to this home, and I remember like this. Normally, this kind of case, I'd be like, "All right, like let's go. Like I'm in it. Like let's get this done." And I remember thinking, getting this and thinking like, I have to get out of this. I have to get out of
Too
this.
much. Yeah.
Um,
Did the place you
and
worked for offer you support, emotional support around the work you were doing?
yeah, we had an employee assistance program that was always available and like confidential and stuff like that. I did not utilize it, but it was available. And we had a representative like visit our office a couple times just to say like, hey, like I'm here if if you have questions, need referrals to whatever. So it was available. I did not use it, so I can't speak to the quality of that program.
Just among your peers, did you feel supported? I know you said you felt like
Oh
you had a
yeah.
strong team. You did.
Yeah, especially in Texas too, but especially in Washington, we were truly a dream team. I had a really excellent supervisor. I had a really great team of colleagues for a while, and eventually we all kind of moved on. So I knew that at any like I could always like go back to the office, like go sit in my supervisor's office. We could close the door and I could just like yell and be like mad and like, how is it that this has happened? Like, what are we gonna do? How, and just let it all just like come out. And she would just kind of like sit there and be like, yeah, like this is bullshit. And like, I agree with you and whatever. And then I would leave with like, okay, like we're going to do XYZ. Like this is the plan. Um, and just keep going, you know? And I think that made a really big difference. I was in child welfare about 5-ish years. So I don't know that I would have been able to make it that long without a supportive team.
Mhm. Yeah, I think it does make a difference who you're working with and how they treat the job, all the kind of things that the whole vibe of the office for me made
Mm-hmm.
a big difference when it seems like the people around you also care. That
Yeah.
just makes the job better. If you live in a community where you feel like people are put down, it's tough. I still believe from teaching and being around people who are still in the field is that our society as a whole, we have a I say this all the time. I think sometimes as humans, we're judgmental pricks. I mean, it's
Mm-hmm.
just like we're just prone to this. I'm better than you. And so I'm going to
Yeah.
tell you how to do this. And it just, I don't
Yep.
know how we get out of that because, especially in child welfare, part of the job is
Mm-hmm.
to assess the family's functioning and be
Yep.
able to help them do better, whatever do better means. That's what I always struggled with is your
Yeah.
do better. We know safety.
Yeah.
That's for then like the case you're talking about. Those are pretty easy. But what
Sure.
about when it's a dirty house? I had this one
Yeah.
girl that had visited their home so many times. She was around 11. She called me DCFS.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think she knew my name.
Yeah.
And when the last couple of times that I went to see her, she said, DCFS, we're dirty. Come on.
Yeah.
Just stop bothering us. And it
Yeah.
just broke my heart. I didn't want to
Yeah.
do like you said, it was one of those days I thought, well, this is just bullshit. Why are we bothering this family because they're dirty? Who
Yeah.
gives a shit? Their
I
kids were
know.
old enough. There were no babies getting into dog shit or anything. It's
Yeah. Yeah.
just the school just would not leave them alone because
We
they
had a
can
family
be
like that
school
too. Yeah.
dirty.
Yeah. We had a family like that too. And ultimately for like different reasons, we had to remove the kids from this home. It was the same thing. We would get calls from the school about these kids all the time. Oh, so and so has lice. Oh, he's in the same clothes as yesterday. Whatever. I remember I didn't go out on this call, but it was my supervisor and one of my coworkers who went to the school because I think it was like the nurse or something that had called. They walk in and they said that this poor kid was like cornered, and the nurse and somebody else are like trying to like comb through his hair to like check for lice or whatever. And it's like, leave this kid alone. Let him go to class. My God. Because it became like a daily like thing. He had like a daily like lice check, and I feel like leave this kid alone.
We have these expectations of what people should do and be like. And I think in our society, and right now, is scarier to me than it's ever been. I think we're
Yeah.
in this place where people find that they think they have the right. I don't know if it's the social media or
Mm-hmm.
the political climate we're living in. I don't
Mm-hmm.
have all the answers, but I feel like people who are living in poverty or have mental illness are
Yeah.
just seen as devalued is the only word I know to use. Now, if you can't do anything, then we'll just
Yeah.
put you over here and sit you over here. We do it to children, we do it to people
Mm-hmm.
the mentally ill, we do it to the aging, we do it to people who are poor. It's just this, I don't know what happened to our hippie chant of
Mm-hmm.
come on, people now.
Yeah.
Let's just love one another. Everybody get
Mm-hmm.
together.
Yeah.
I don't know what happened.
Yeah.
You got any ideas on how to fix it?
Uh, um, no. um,
You're too
I
busy with a 6 month old. I'm
no.
old enough. I can just sit and think about that.
No. I I think there's just such a lack of understanding of how things work, of how people work, how having kids works. It's like schools were so quick to judge families for, kids not having clean clothes, kids having lice, whatever. And it's like, like, okay, so mom's got, 6 kids. One of them's a baby. She's got to have that one in daycare, or somebody's got to watch this kid. Mom's got to go to work. She's got to get the other kids like all in school. She has to go to counseling. She's got to do substance abuse. Like, I mean,
Try it.
how is it that we're supposed to like make this work? And of course, like, as the man, we are telling her, this is your plan, you got to get all this shit done, or like we have to go back to court,
Yeah.
and it sucks. But at the same time, it's like, first and foremost, my role is child safety right now, and in order for like your kid to be safe, like we need XYZ needs to be happening, and I know that resources are limited and you're going through, whatever it is. And I'm so sorry about that. But my role right now is child safety. And that sometimes was hard. Feeling like I want to do more for you, or that your kid's not safe, but I feel so bad for you. Like, I know why, I know like what's going on. And like, oh, like I can't, there's nothing I can do about that reason. That's the limited role that you have. We
Doesn't
can't.
that happen a lot where we can see
Yeah,
but have no tools to help?
and I mean, we can't spend like 3 years working with every family. You know,
So
um,
true, so true.
and there were some that I would have loved to have like stayed with, who could have certainly benefited from services longer term, but we don't have the resources to do that.
We have
So
money
that,
for wars. By God,
yeah,
we can go to war.
and whatever stupid ballroom and whatever, yeah,
We'll spend
don't
that
even get
six
me
hundred
started.
billion dollars on a war, but no, sorry, we can't help our poor people.
I
I
know.
know.
Yeah,
We can't go
I
off
know.
on that tangent. Is there something that you want to say that we haven't talked about that you just want to get out to the whole world that will listen to this podcast? Would you
Is
tell somebody to go into child welfare or no?
I would tell some people to go into child welfare. Um, I think that you have to, like I said before, you have to be willing to put your ego at the door and be as human and normal as the people that you're going to be sitting across from. And if
Yep.
you're not able or willing to do that, go do something else.
There you
You
go.
know, go do something else. You have to be able to sit and talk with people. You have to meet people where they're at. If you're going to come in with your authority and I'm CPS and this is how things have to be and whatever, go do something else. That's not for you. That's not the kind of person that families and certainly that kids deserve to be working with.
So agree. And you can start the job and think it's a fit for you. And I agree with you. If you realize it's not, then just go. There's lots of
Yeah,
social worky things you can do. Just
yeah,
not, don't try to work with families if you don't really have a heart for it.
for
Totally
sure.
agree.
Yeah,
Well, it's been my pleasure to spend this time with you. And I keep telling all my interviewees, it's not one and done. I'll be haunting you again, I'm sure.
please.
I'm so happy I got to hear some of your stories
Yeah,
yeah, we'll talk again. Saying thank
yeah.
you.
It was great to talk with you.
Out.
Thanks.
Bye.